June 9, 1944. 0440 hours. Near the Hurtgen Forest, Western Front. Dense fog pressed against the treetops. Moisture clung to helmets and rifles. Vision fell to less than 15 meters. Every patrol moved with tension because one wrong step in this fog could bring them into a German patrol or one of their own squads. The forest was quiet but carried a sharp sense of danger that never faded. Private Elias Thorne moved through the tree line with measured steps. His unit advanced on a narrow trail that felt more like a maze than a route. He kept his eyes on the dark outlines of the men ahead. They vanished and reappeared in the haze. Even sound felt distorted in the thick air. Footsteps echoed. Branches snapped in odd directions. Eli had seen these conditions before in civilian life, but most of the men around him had not. Eli grew up in the Pacific Northwest. He worked the forest since he was 13. He handled axes, saws, and heavy timber. He worked long days in deep woods where fog could sit for hours. As a logging foreman at 26, he managed crews, marked trees, and walked uncharted forest paths. He trusted his eyes and his instinct more than any compass. He carried that mindset into the war. The army leaned on compasses and strict bearings. Officers insisted on fixed routes and timed advances. This worked on open fields and clear days. It failed here. Fog made compasses harder to use. Men drifted off course without noticing. A squad could move 10 steps too far and vanish from the group. This happened often. Sometimes they wandered near German patrols. Sometimes they crossed friendly lines and triggered fights that should never have happened. Eli hated how often this happened. 3 days earlier his platoon had lost a patrol only 200 meters from camp. They drifted left, reached a small ridge, and walked into a German security team. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. 2 men died. 1 vanished in the fog. The survivors came back shaken and angry. Eli knew the pattern. Fog changed depth, sound, and perception. The forest twisted direction in ways that felt unreal. He watched his unit try to fix the problem with louder signals, tighter formations, and repeated compass checks. None of it worked. The fog swallowed everything. It punished every mistake. During one stalled advance, Eli noticed something he had seen hundreds of times back home. A patch of stripped bark on the east side of a fir tree caught a faint glint from his flashlight when he checked his map. It was not bright. It was not obvious. It was a natural shimmer that came from moisture on exposed inner bark. He knew that glint well. Loggers used it at dawn when light was weak. It helped them confirm direction in heavy fog or dark mornings. He studied the bark again. The effect came from the smooth inner surface of certain trees. When stripped clean in a specific way and set at the right height, the inner bark reflected any weak light. Even moonlight. Even a small angle of a soldier's flashlight under a coat. Eli stared at it for a long second. A simple idea formed in his mind. He could use this. He tested the thought quietly. He found another tree. He peeled a narrow strip of bark with his knife. He kept it small so it looked natural. He pressed his thumb against the exposed layer. Moisture made the surface smooth. When he shifted his angle, it caught a faint shimmer that was hard to see unless you looked for it. That was the point. It needed to be discreet. It needed to guide only the men who knew what to search for. Eli spent the next days watching how fog behaved. He learned how far the glint could be seen. 12 to 15 meters with no flashlight. 20 meters with a covered flashlight that leaked a thin line of light. He checked different trees. Fir worked well. Spruce worked even better. Oak was poor. Birch was good only when the bark was fresh. He experimented during short halts. He tried different strip sizes. Thin strips gave too little shine. Wide strips glowed too much. He found the middle. A strip the width of 2 fingers gave the right balance. He tested height. Chest level worked best. Too high and men missed it. Too low and it caught mud or debris. He said nothing to officers yet. They would reject it. They called unofficial methods distractions. They trusted doctrine more than field creativity. He did not blame them. They had to follow rules. He had to keep men alive. The next fog patrol gave him a chance to test his idea. His squad needed to move through a sector known for lost patrols. The fog stayed thick for 6 hours. The trees blocked stars and moonlight. Even the wind stopped. It felt like the forest held its breath. Eli walked at the front with 2 men. He carried a pocket of bark strips he prepared earlier. Each strip was fitted with a thin wrap of damp cloth that kept the natural shine strong. He moved quickly and quietly. He attached the strips to selected trees with thin wooden pegs. The process took seconds. He kept spacing consistent. Each marker was placed so the next one could be seen only when you reached the first. The squad followed him using the faint glint that appeared only when they looked at the right angle. It kept them aligned. It kept the formation tight. No one drifted. No one stepped into the wrong path. 2 hours later they reached the far checkpoint without a single man getting lost. The return trip worked the same. The path felt safe. The fog still pressed around them, but the squad moved with confidence. Men talked about it in low voices. They asked how he guided them so well. Eli only said he used tree markers. They respected the result. They trusted him more. He tested the system again the next night. Same fog. Same forest. Same markers. Same clean result. The squad arrived on target. No one fired on friendly units. No one wandered into enemy scouts. Officers noticed the difference. They asked him how he kept alignment in conditions that crippled other patrols. Eli gave a modest answer. He said the forest gave him small clues. He said you only needed to know where to look. June 12, 1944. 0315 hours. The fog thickened again. The forest felt tighter than before. The battalion prepared for another series of reconnaissance runs. Tension rose because 3 separate platoons had gone off course the previous night. One platoon had wandered across a shallow ravine and almost ran into German listening posts. Another crossed into the right flank of a friendly unit and triggered a warning volley that nearly turned deadly. Officers were under pressure to fix the problem, but they had no new solution. Eli listened as they discussed compass corrections, tighter formations, and slower movement. He knew none of it would help. Fog destroyed geometry. Fog collapsed direction into a small circle. If one man drifted, the entire chain followed. Eli's squad had been the only one to complete its route without confusion. The officers wanted to know why. Lieutenant Avery called him over. Avery was a sharp officer. He respected field results more than clean diagrams. He looked at Eli with cautious interest. Your squad hit every checkpoint. Tell me exactly how. Eli explained the basic idea. He said he used stripped bark from spruce and fir. He said the natural glint helped maintain alignment without noise or signals. Avery frowned at first. The method sounded too simple. It sounded primitive in a war filled with radios, compasses, and maps. But Avery also knew the truth. Nothing else worked that. Wait, show me, he said. Eli led him to a set of trees near the forward line. He peeled a clean strip of bark, smoothed it with a quick pass of his thumb, and stepped back. Moisture made the strip faintly reflective. Even in darkness the exposed wood had a subtle shine. Avery leaned forward and narrowed his eyes. That's visible. Only if you know where to look, Eli said. And only if you are facing the right direction. Avery tested distance. He stood 15 meters away. He saw nothing. Eli told him to shift 2 steps left. The glint appeared as a thread of light. Avery nodded. He understood. He asked how long the bark stayed effective. Eli explained it depended on moisture and temperature. Fresh markers held their shine for 8 to 10 hours. Rain increased the effect. Dry heat reduced it. But fog, the biggest problem, made the glint stronger. Avery stood silent for a moment, thinking through the implications. Then he ordered Eli to prepare a demonstration path for the next patrol. If it worked again, Avery would push it to the company level. Eli walked into the tree line and began preparing markers. He moved fast because time was short. Fog shifted. Light changed. German patrols moved unpredictably near the sector. He set strips at steady intervals. He picked trees with smooth surfaces and reliable moisture. He ignored rough trunks. He checked each position twice. When he returned, Avery brought a squad forward. They did not know the route. They did not know the method. Avery told them only one rule. Follow whatever clue Eli placed for you. Find the far marker. Return safely. No lights. No signals. No sound unless needed. The squad moved into the fog. Their shapes faded into silhouettes. The forest swallowed them. Eli and Avery waited. 15 minutes passed. 20 minutes passed. Eli stayed calm. He trusted the markers. Avery paced, listening for gunfire. They heard nothing. That silence mattered. Silence meant the squad stayed on course. At the 40-minute mark the squad returned with steady steps. No one drifted. No one argued about direction. No one carried the tight fear that usually showed on lost patrols. Their sergeant spoke first. Whatever he used, it works. Avery looked at Eli with a new expression. Respect mixed with curiosity. He told Eli to prepare a full demonstration for the company the next night. Eli nodded. He knew it would be harder. More men meant more confusion. Large groups made mistakes faster. But he believed the method could scale. That night rain rolled in. Thin droplets formed on helmets and jackets. Fog thickened into a heavy wall. The forest felt unreal. Light bent strangely between trunks. The ground smelled of wet moss and rotting leaves. Eli prepared new bark strips. He picked them carefully. He chose trees that faced the patrol path at the right angle. He made sure the glint lines chained together. He moved deeper into the forest than before. He set more markers. He worked quietly with two men who helped him fix the pegs. Both had seen the effect and trusted it. Avery gathered the company behind the forward line. He explained nothing except the mission. They needed to move through the fog to the far ridge. They needed to return without losing formation. They needed to avoid crossing into the neighboring unit. Eli walked at the front. He tapped the first tree with his glove. The faint glint appeared. Men behind him saw a small thread of dull shimmer. They whispered among themselves, confused but hopeful. They moved out. Fog swallowed the company. Eli paced steadily. He kept his eyes on each marker. The glint came and went with shifts in angle. It was not bright. It was not obvious. It was just enough. The line held. No one drifted more than a few steps. The formation felt tighter than it had in days. Men walked with less fear. They followed small clues instead of guessing direction. Halfway through the route they ran into trouble. A German scout team moved near the trail. Eli stopped instantly. He raised his hand. The company froze. Sound carried strangely in fog, but the soft crunch of boots on wet ground told him the enemy was close. The enemy scouts passed 10 meters away. They did not spot the company because the men stayed silent and still. The Germans moved on. Eli waited a full minute before signaling movement again. The path resumed. The company reached the far ridge cleanly. They returned on the same markers. It took 2 hours. When they emerged from the fog, Avery's expression made everything clear. He was convinced. He ordered the creation of a full marker kit for the entire company. He told Eli to train selected men. He wanted a team that could set the glint markers ahead of patrols. He wanted the method standardized in their sector. Eli agreed. He knew the responsibility would grow. He also knew this method could save many lives if executed correctly. He spent the next day teaching men how to select the right trees, prepare strips, judge moisture, and position markers in patterns aligned with terrain. It felt satisfying. Not because of pride. Because fewer men would get lost. Fewer would die in pointless fog encounters. June 14, 1944. 0220 hours. The fog felt heavier than all previous days. It lay across the forest floor like a thick sheet. The temperature dropped fast. Moisture clung to every surface. The conditions were perfect for Eli's method, but also perfect for German ambush teams that relied on stealth and confusion. Command ordered a 3-squad advance to probe a sector known for enemy infiltration. The previous week several German scouting teams had slipped between Allied lines during fog periods. They cut phone wires, mapped mortar positions, and vanished before sunrise. Higher command needed clarity on routes, movement patterns, and possible hidden positions. The job fell to Avery's company. Eli prepared 70 fresh bark strips before the patrol. He checked each piece with trained eyes. He rejected any that lacked sheen. He kept the best ones damp with a cloth dipped in pooled rainwater. He selected trees with smooth, clean faces. He marked a path that moved through shallow ravines, across 2 ridges, and past a cluster of trees that often disoriented new soldiers. 3 trail teams moved out first. Eli led the primary team. Corporal Rains led the second. Private Holden led the third. Each team carried a pouch of strips. Eli assigned spacing intervals. 1 marker every 7 to 10 meters depending on slope. More markers on curves. Fewer on straight paths. They worked with speed because the company needed the trail ready before the fog thickened further. By 0300 hours the full route was marked. The patrol assembled. Eli stood at the front once again. The forest muffled sound. Even a quiet breath felt loud. He signaled movement. The first 2 kilometers were smooth. The glint markers lined the path. Soldiers followed them like stepping stones of faint silver. No one drifted. No one whispered. You could feel the difference in morale. Men walked in calm formation instead of the tense, scattered pattern that usually appeared in fog. Then the first sign of danger appeared. A marker on the left tree glinted sharply, more than expected. Eli paused. He stepped closer. The strip was intact, but the bark around it had shallow cuts. Someone touched the tree. Recently. He crouched and studied the ground. The soil near the trunk was disturbed. Tracks pointed inward, then disappeared deeper into the fog. He signaled Rains forward. Rains confirmed the tracks. German scouts had moved near the path not long ago. The patrol tightened formation. Rifles raised. Safety catches clicked off in quiet rhythm. Eli pressed forward, but now he watched the side trails more than the path ahead. Another marker appeared. This one weaker. Eli approached it and saw that someone had scraped the inner bark lightly, an attempt to reduce its reflectivity. The Germans did not know the purpose of the strips, but they sensed they meant something. Their instinct told them to disrupt what they did not understand. Eli whispered to Avery. The lieutenant nodded and adjusted the approach. They widened the spacing between squads to avoid clustered targets. They slowed pace. The glint markers remained the backbone of the patrol, but now they also served as early warning signs. Any disturbance meant enemy activity. They advanced deeper. At 0410 hours the patrol reached a narrow ridge known to confuse even experienced scouts. Fog pooled thick across the top. Visibility dropped to 4 meters. This was where most lost patrols had drifted in previous days. Eli placed markers earlier at knee height on this stretch. The fog here hung low and swallowed chest-level glints. The lower markers worked better. Soldiers moved with careful steps. Each man stepped where the faint shimmer told him to go. Suddenly a burst of movement cut through the fog. 2 German scouts rushed forward from the right side. Their silhouettes appeared as dark shapes with rifles held low. Eli shouted a warning. The squad reacted instantly. A short volley of fire cut through the ambushers before they reached the path. The fight lasted 5 seconds. Then silence returned. Avery examined the bodies. Both scouts carried wire cutters, knives and small satchels. They were mapping Allied patrol routes. If Eli had not noticed the earlier disturbed markers, the ambush would have been larger. They moved on. The next section of forest narrowed into a corridor between thick fir clusters. The path dipped gently. The fog flowed into the dip like water. Sound again shifted in unnatural ways. Men gripped their rifles tighter. Eli recognized the terrain. He had marked this stretch with wider strips because thicker fog muted visibility at sharp angles. Each marker needed to catch light from any position. He checked them quickly. All intact. Then he stopped. A faint sound reached him from far ahead. Not boots. Not rifles. Something metallic. A soft clink. He raised his fist. The line froze. 2 minutes passed. The sound came again. A single metallic tap, like a buckle brushing against a canteen. Avery moved beside Eli. He whispered for bearings. Eli pointed slightly left. The patrol shifted formation and moved toward the sound with caution. They advanced 5 meters. 10 meters. Then the silhouettes emerged. 4 German scouts, hunched low and moving slowly to avoid detection. They were walking parallel to the marked path, unaware how close the Allied patrol was. Avery signaled a silent approach. The scouts moved without light, trusting their own senses. The Allied patrol used the glint markers to maintain direction without noise. They closed the distance quietly. Within moments Avery gave the final hand signal. 3 rifles fired once each. The scouts collapsed before they could react. Fog swallowed the echo. Eli examined the terrain nearby. He saw a pattern. The Germans were tracing the same sector repeatedly. They were using the valley to slip between lines. Their entire movement relied on Allied confusion in low visibility. Now that confusion no longer existed. The patrol resumed. They reached the far checkpoint at 0540 hours, just before dawn began to break. Light pushed through the fog slowly. The glint markers grew brighter as the sky brightened behind them. The forest changed shape. Silhouettes formed. Shadows stretched. Avery ordered a half-circle security perimeter. Eli used the time to inspect the final stretch of markers. None were tampered with. This told him the enemy activity centered on the middle ridge and fog corridor. It aligned with previous infiltration reports. The patrol returned using the same markers. The process was quick. The squad felt more confident on return routes than at any time in the past week. The markers guided them naturally as if the forest itself pointed them home. Just after sunrise they reached camp. Officers gathered immediately. Avery delivered the report, emphasizing the enemy presence near the marked corridor and the effectiveness of the marker system. He noted how the glint trail allowed silent redirection and ambush avoidance. By mid-morning the battalion adopted the method informally. Eli became the designated trainer for all patrol leaders. Soldiers from different companies approached him for instruction. They wanted practical guidance. They wanted clarity in a forest that often felt like a trap. Eli taught them everything he knew. How to judge moisture. How to test angles. how to align markers with terrain dips, how to pick trees with natural sheen, how to keep spacing consistent in poor visibility. His explanations were short, direct, and based on experience, not theory. The method spread faster than he expected. June 16, 1944. 0100 hours. The battalion prepared for one of its most difficult tasks. A coordinated night movement across a sector known for broken terrain, heavy fog, and multiple instances of lost units. Higher command wanted 3 companies to reposition along a new defensive alignment before dawn. The problem was familiar. Fog would blanket the forest through most of the night. This made navigation nearly impossible on normal days, and dangerous when moving large formations. Avery requested Eli and his trained teams to create a full marker route that stretched almost 2 kilometers. It needed to handle nearly 400 men. It needed to hold up under multiple passes. It needed redundancy in case parts of the route were disturbed by enemy patrols. Eli accepted the task without hesitation. He knew the workload would be heavy. He also knew failure would bring chaos. He selected 16 men he had trained earlier. They split into 4 groups. Each group carried pouches filled with prepared bark strips, small wooden pegs, and cloth-wrapped damp markers. They coordinated spacing and height. They memorized the terrain layout. By 0130 hours they moved out. Fog stayed thick from the start. You could barely see your boots. Eli relied on his memory of the terrain more than sight. He moved with speed and precision. He chose trees that formed a clean path. He made sure each glint appeared at predictable intervals. He set markers at 2 heights for redundancy. Chest level for standard use. Knee level for heavy fog. 2 hours passed. By 0330 hours the entire path was complete. Eli walked the full route again to confirm consistency. His men followed behind, checking visibility from different angles. Everything worked. Even in near-zero visibility the glint pattern formed a ribbon of faint guidance through the forest. Company movements began at 0400 hours. Eli positioned himself at the entry point. He watched the first squad step into the fog. Soldiers moved with careful confidence, scanning for each glint, following the path without sound. The forest swallowed them almost instantly, but Eli knew they would stay aligned. He jogged ahead to intercept the next group. He guided them into the path and sent them forward. Movement continued in cycles. Every few minutes another squad entered the fog. The glint system absorbed them and pushed them forward like an invisible corridor. At 0445 hours the first complication appeared. A runner reported enemy scouts ahead. They were moving across the marker line. Eli understood the risk. If the enemy tampered with the strips, the entire formation could collapse into confusion. He ran forward into the fog, following the familiar shine. He moved fast but silent. His breathing stayed controlled. Boots pressed softly against wet soil. After several minutes he reached the reported location. He found 2 markers scraped lightly. He found disturbed soil near a tree. He listened. Voices whispered somewhere ahead. German accents. He crouched and waited. 3 enemy scouts approached from the right. They carried rifles and wire cutters. They moved slow, searching the path for clues. They did not know exactly what the markers meant. They only knew Allied patrols moved with unusual precision in fog, and they wanted to disrupt it. Eli watched them examine one of the strips. One scout tried to peel it off. Another tested the surface with a knife tip. They whispered to each other. He slowly lifted his rifle. Before he could fire, 2 Allied scouts from Avery's platoon emerged from the fog behind him. They signaled silently. Eli nodded. 3 rifles fired at once. The enemy scouts collapsed without a sound that carried far. Eli checked the markers again. Only minor disruption. He repaired the peeled strip with another fresh one. He strengthened one peg. The path remained functional. He whispered to the 2 Allied scouts. Hold this section until the companies pass. The scouts took positions. Eli moved on. By 0515 hours the first company had fully crossed the sector. The second followed close behind. Soldiers moved in steady rows. They carried gear, weapons, and mortar tubes. The glint markers supported them like rails. No one drifted. No one collided with another unit. The third company advanced after sunrise. Fog stayed heavy despite growing daylight. Sunlight filtered through treetops but did not penetrate the lower layers. The glints brightened slightly in morning light, making navigation even easier. Eli stayed ahead of the final group. He checked each section. He repaired any worn strip. He adjusted heights in places where fog patterns changed. He worked with a focused calm that came from years spent in forests. This environment felt familiar to him. The danger did not. But the terrain itself made sense. At 0700 hours the movement ended. All three companies reached their new positions. The battalion avoided the chaos that usually came with fog shifts. Not a single squad got lost. Not a single friendly fire incident occurred. Officers who once doubted the method now respected it openly. Later that morning the battalion commander met Eli. He rarely spoke directly to privates, but today he made an exception. He asked for a full explanation of the technique. Eli described it in simple terms. Natural reflectivity, control placement, moisture-dependent glint, predictable intervals, terrain understanding. The commander listened with interest. His expression never softened, but his tone held seriousness. Your method prevented openings in our line. It protected three companies in conditions that usually break cohesion. This will not be forgotten. He did not offer medals or praise. That was not his nature. But the words carried weight. When the commander left, several soldiers approached Eli. They thanked him quietly. They did not exaggerate. They spoke plainly because they understood the truth. Without those small glints, the fog would have turned the forest into a trap. By midday the fog began to lift. The markers dried and lost some of their shine. Eli walked the path again to remove old strips. He did this because leaving signs behind revealed movement patterns to the enemy. He collected dozens of pegs. He scraped away exposed bark with handfuls of moss to hide evidence. He treated the forest like a workshop he needed to keep clean. When he finished, he returned to camp and saw new orders on the board. Night patrols would double over the next week. Enemy infiltration attempts would increase. Fog forecasts predicted heavy layers every night. This meant Eli's method would become standard for all patrols in the sector. He did not feel pride. He felt responsibility. June 18, 1944. 0200 hours. Fog returned thicker than the previous nights. It rolled across the ground in uneven waves. The battalion prepared for continuous patrol cycles because enemy units had been detected shifting through the lower valleys. German infiltration teams relied on darkness and confusion. They slipped between positions, mapped artillery lines and looked for weak points. Avery summoned Eli before the first patrol. He held a German field report that scouts recovered earlier that day. The report described Allied patrols moving with unusual accuracy during fog. It mentioned faint reflective points along trees. The Germans could not understand the pattern. They assumed Allied units used new optical devices or hidden signals. They did not consider natural materials. Avery handed the document to Eli. They know something is guiding us, but they do not know what it is. They will try harder to find it. Eli read the lines. The description was vague. The enemy noted scattered glints but could not trace any route. Their confusion kept the system safe. Eli knew the secret to its effectiveness. Each marker was faint. Each glint depended on angle, moisture, and height. Anyone who did not understand the placement logic would never decode it. Still, the enemy interest meant increased risk. Avery assigned Eli to lead a special patrol to assess German reactions along the ridge where earlier infiltration occurred. Eli gathered 8 men. All had trained under him. All understood the glint markers. They moved into the fog without hesitation. The first section of the route felt familiar. The forest had a pattern Eli recognized. He placed markers earlier to assist night movement. The patrol flowed along the path smoothly. Every few meters a faint glint confirmed direction. After 20 minutes they reached the valley where previous scouts had disturbed markers. Eli scanned the route. The strips remained intact. No new scratches. No footprints. No knife marks. But the forest felt unsettled. The fog here moved slower. Sound hung heavier in the air. He knelt near a tree and touched the soil. It was smooth. Unbroken. That told him the enemy had not passed recently. The patrol advanced further. 2 men flanked out slightly but stayed aligned using parallel glints. They acted as eyes on the edges. This technique reduced risk from lateral ambush. Then the first sign of change appeared. A marker ahead glinted weakly. Too weak. Eli approached it. He saw why. The bark around it had been rubbed by a cloth. Someone had tried to reduce moisture to remove reflectivity. It was a crude attempt, likely by scouts who saw the shine but did not understand the source. Eli replaced the strip quickly. He whispered to the men. They are testing us now. Stay alert. They moved deeper. The fog thickened further. Eli placed new markers as they advanced. He worked with speed. He trusted his instincts. Every marker connected the patrol to a path that only they understood. Suddenly Private Ward raised a fist. Everyone stopped. Ward pointed ahead. A low sound echoed through the fog. Not voices. Not boots. Something mechanical. Slow. Rhythmic. Eli
Recognized it. A German hand-cranked generator. Scouts used it to power small signal lamps during mapping operations. That meant a larger team was ahead, not just 2 or 3 men. The patrol moved forward silently. They advanced until shapes emerged. 5 German soldiers stood near a clearing. One worked the generator. Another held a map. 3 others scanned the fog with rifles angled outward. Eli signaled his men to spread out. He positioned them along a curved line that matched the terrain. Fog hid their presence. The Germans appeared unaware. Avery had drilled them on silent engagements. Eli raised his hand. 3 rifles fired at once. The Germans dropped. The operator collapsed next to the generator. The map bearer fell with the paper still in his hand. Eli moved forward. He took the map and studied it. The enemy had begun tracing paths of predicted Allied movement. Their arrows pointed toward known patrol zones. But nothing indicated they understood the glint markers. They still assumed the Allies used lantern signals or hidden devices. This gave Eli an advantage. The enemy searched for the wrong thing. He ordered the patrol to sweep the area for additional scouts. They found 1 wounded soldier crawling toward the trees. He carried a pouch with chalk and string, tools used to mark routes.
He refused to speak.
Eli took the pouch and signaled 2 men to secure the prisoner. The patrol completed its sweep and returned to the main path. Dawn approached. Fog started to thin. Eli checked markers along the return route. Many still held strong glints. Some faded due to drying bark. Others brightened as sunlight cracked through the canopy. He replaced several to maintain continuity for the next night. When they reached camp, Avery met them immediately. Eli gave him the captured map and described the encounter. Avery studied it. They know where we patrol, but they do not know how we stay aligned. Eli nodded. The glint markers gave the Allies a silent structure the enemy could not decode. During the afternoon briefing, officers planned the next sequence of patrols. They wanted to use the glint system not only for navigation, but also to shape enemy expectations. They realized something important. If the enemy expected predictable movement patterns, the Allies could use false glint trails to mislead them. Avery explained the idea to Eli. Place decoy markers that lead nowhere. If enemy scouts follow them, they will waste hours. Eli agreed. He trained a smaller team to create misleading paths. These paths had similar marker spacing but lacked the subtle natural glint pattern that only trained eyes noticed. Anyone unfamiliar with the real shine would follow them without question. That night, Eli oversaw the installation of 3 decoy routes. He placed them in areas where enemy scouts often moved. He used weaker tree types and inconsistent spacing to mislead anyone who tried to map the route. The real patrol routes stayed hidden behind proper markers. Hours later, Allied spotters heard distant voices from the valley. German scouts were arguing. They had followed a decoy path into a dead zone. They believed it was a natural patrol route and wasted half the night. The deception worked. At dawn, Eli walked the main routes again. He fixed several markers damaged by drying. He adjusted angles changed by wind. He reinforced pegs loosened by moisture. He noticed something else. The forest felt quieter around his markers. Soldiers moved with more confidence. The fog no longer frightened them the way it did earlier in the campaign. They trusted the system. They trusted the man who understood the woods better than anyone. Fog had been the enemy's ally for weeks. Now it became the Allies' advantage. June 20th, 1944. 0110 hours. Fog pressed low across the Hurtgen sector. It rolled in slow sheets that blurred the tree line and muted every sound. This night carried more weight than the others. German infiltration teams were expected to push through the valley before dawn. Intelligence suggested they planned to exploit confusion and strike mortar positions. Avery gathered his platoon leaders. He explained the situation clearly. Enemy scouts would move under fog cover. They would avoid open ground. They would try to slip between units and attack supply lines. The battalion needed a silent network of reliable navigation routes. Eli's glint system became the foundation of the plan. 3 long patrol paths were created. 2 were real. One was a decoy designed to draw German scouts into a dead sector. Eli oversaw the entire operation. He inspected bark strips. He checked pegs. He walked each path twice before the patrols deployed. He worked with a calm precision that came from years in thick forests where mistakes meant injury. At 0200 hours, the first Allied patrol moved out. Eli stayed ahead of them. He checked visibility angles and replaced any marker that lost shine. Fog changed rapidly. A strip that glinted clearly 5 minutes earlier could fade when moisture shifted. Eli adapted in real time. The patrol progressed steadily. Soldiers scanned for the reflective thread that kept them aligned. No one drifted. No one hesitated. The technique had become second nature. Halfway through the route, Eli heard a distant snap. A branch broke under weight. He lifted his hand and froze. The line stopped instantly. He listened. 2 more soft cracks echoed through the fog. Sound carried strangely. Direction was uncertain. He signaled Ward and Henson to flank out 20 steps, but maintain contact through the glint pattern. They moved slowly, keeping the faint shine on their right side. Eli advanced a few meters. He crouched and placed his palm near the ground. Warm soil. Recently disturbed footprints leading toward the patrol route. He whispered to Avery. "Scouts are close. Very close." Avery signaled for rifles to be raised quietly. The patrol stayed low. The fog parted slightly. Dark shapes appeared between the trees. German scouts moved in a staggered line. They walked with discipline, rifles ready. One held a small lamp covered with cloth. Another carried chalk. They were mapping the area again, trying to find clues that explained Allied movement. They stopped near one of the glint markers. The lead scout leaned in and stared at it. He touched the bark. He scraped it with a knife. He stepped back and whispered to the others. They seemed confused. They expected metal or glass. They found only wood. Eli watched them closely. He knew the scouts were seconds away from discovering the faint pattern that separated real markers from decoys. If they followed the glint correctly, they could stumble into the true patrol route. He shifted his heel against a stone to signal Ward and Henson. They understood the cue. The 2 flanking men positioned themselves behind the scouts. Avery watched Eli. He waited for the decision. Eli lowered his hand slowly. 3 rifles fired. The shots cut through the fog. The scouts fell instantly. No cry. No confusion. The forest absorbed the sound. The patrol moved forward. Eli examined the disturbed marker. The scout had scraped it lightly. He removed it and placed a fresh strip. He adjusted the angle to match the next marker. He checked spacing with a short backward glance. 10 minutes later, they reached the valley floor. This area carried the most risk. Fog pooled heavily. Sound bounced in odd arcs. Depth perception collapsed. Without the glint markers, the patrol would have no sense of direction. Eli moved quietly through the valley. The strips shined at knee level. The shine was faint but perfect for navigation. Soldiers followed them like a chain of small signals. Then a louder sound cut the silence. Boots rushed against wet grass. A German squad stepped out from behind a cluster of spruce. They had used the fog to set an ambush. Their rifles were raised. Light caught the metal of their bayonets. Eli reacted instantly. He dropped low and signaled left and right. His men spread in 2 motions and used the terrain for cover. The glint markers kept them aligned even while flanking. The first German burst missed. The Allied response was sharp and controlled. Short volleys hit 2 attackers. The rest scattered into the mist. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds, but it revealed something important. The enemy was no longer probing. They were actively hunting. Avery inspected the area after the fight. He found German route markers on the ground. Chalk arrows. Pieces of cloth tied to roots. They had marked this sector for repeated infiltration attempts. Fog allowed them to operate. Now fog failed them. The patrol reached the far checkpoint and formed a defensive line. Eli checked the marker trail again. The system held. No drift. No confusion. No accidental separation. At dawn they returned to camp. The glint markers grew brighter as sunlight hit them from behind. Soldiers walked with steady steps through the thinning fog. They were tired but confident. When Eli reached camp, the battalion intelligence officer asked him to explain the system again. He asked about range, durability, moisture levels, and spacing. He asked about night conditions and sustainability. Eli answered everything in simple terms. He did not speak like a theorist. He spoke like a man who worked the woods. He knew what moisture did to bark. He knew how fog bent light. He knew how trees aligned across ridges. The officer wrote it all down. 2 days later, the battalion filed an internal report describing the Thorn-Glint method. It noted reductions in patrol casualties. It listed improved cohesion in fog. It documented decreased friendly fire risk. It recorded how multiple companies completed night movements without drift. The report circulated through the regiment. Officers copied it by hand. The method spread to other sectors, not through formal doctrine, through word of mouth, through soldiers who wanted a practical edge. Eli did not seek recognition. He stayed in the forest each night, teaching new men, adjusting routes, and maintaining the strips. The war did not slow for innovation. It demanded it daily. By early July, the battalion left the Hurtgen sector. Fog remained heavy. The forest remained dangerous. But the men moved with a sense of control they never had before. When Eli left the woods for the last time, he peeled away the final marker. He pressed his hand against the tree. The inner bark felt smooth,
Moist.
familiar. It reminded him of home. He returned to the unit without ceremony.
No speech.
No announcement. Just quiet steps through a forest that had once swallowed entire squads. Years later, no official records mentioned him by name. His method lived only in fragments of patrol notes and the memories of men who walked through impossible fog and reached the other side without getting lost. Fog had killed many soldiers that year. But for a short time, in one difficult sector, a lumberjack's knowledge turned the forest from a threat into a guide.